Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Patience. So today we are going to be making this beautiful monostrap 2 birthday dress for the birthday queen. So before we get started, kindly click the subscribe button. If you have done that, let's get into it. So I'll be using about 30 yards of tulle and 2 yards of this silk fabric and 1.5 yards of this velvet fabric, and I'll also be drafting on a pattern paper. So I've gone ahead to mark the shoulder line. On the shoulder line, I'll mark half of the shoulder measurement, which is 8.5 inches, and I'm going to be using 4 inches for the width of the neck. Now from the shoulder measurement, I'll come down by 1 inch and I'll slant the shoulder this way. So after doing that, I'll mark half of the armhole measurement I'm working with, which is 8 inches, and I'll mark shoulder to bust point, which is 11 inches, and the shoulder to waist, which is 17 inches. I'll add half inch for sewing allowance, that's 17.5 inches. So after doing that, I'll bring down the shoulder measurement on the chest line, which is 8.5 inches, and then I'll connect the points, and then I'll mark the midpoint of the line, which is 4 inches. So for the front armhole, I'll go in by 3/4 inch, and for the back armhole, I'll go in by 1/2 inch. I'll make a slant line to the edge of the shoulder this way, and then I'll curve the armhole. So this is the shoulder line, the chest line, the bust line, and the waist line. So I'll be adding a dart to this dress. So I'll mark my bust span measurement, which is 4 inches. So I'll be adding 1/2 inch for sewing allowance, that is 4.5 inches. So I'll mark 4.5 inches on the waistline, also on the bust line. On the bust line, I'll come down by 1 inch, and I'll ensure it is at 4.5 inches. So I'll connect it this way. So I'll be using 1 inch for the dart. So I'll mark 1/2 inch on both sides, and I'll create my dart. So now for the circumference measurement. The bust circumference I'm working with is 38 inches. Divided by 4 is 9.5 inches. So I will mark 9.5 inches. And then I'll add 1 inch for side seam allowance. So the waist circumference I'm working with is 31 inches. Divided by 4 is 7.75. So I'll mark 7.75, and then I'll add 1 inch for that and 1 inch for side seam allowance. So I made a mistake earlier, so ignore this line. So that is it for the front piece. I'll use it as a pattern to cut out the back piece. So I left 1 inch for zipper allowance on the back piece. I'm just going to place it this way, pin it down, and trace it out before I cut out the monostrap. So I cut out the back armhole first, and now I'll cut out the front armhole. In order to cut out the monostrap, I'm going to fold in the zipper allowance on the back piece this way, and I'll use a masking tape to secure it. So after doing that, I'll place the front and the back piece this way and align it. I'll pin it down. So for us to understand, I'm going to label this as the right side and this as the left. Now, if you want the mono strap to be on the left side, you make a curve from this point to this point. If you want it to be on the right side, you make a curve from this point to this point. So I want the mono strap to be on the right side. So I am going to determine how deep I want the neck. So if you don't want it too open, you can use 4 inches, but if you want it open, you can use 6 inches. Well, I'll be using 5 inches. So I'm going to make a curve from this point to this point to this point, the armhole area. And then I'll cut it out. And I will mark my darts on the back piece. So on the back piece, I'll be using 5 inches for my dart because I don't want the dart to be too close to the zip. So I'll mark 5 inches on the waist, and on the armhole, I will mark 5 inches also. And I'll come down by 2 inches. I'll make sure it is at 5 inches, and then I'll connect the points, and I'll be using 1 inch for the dart also. So I'll mark ½ inch on both sides and create my darts. So this is the back piece and the front piece. Now for my back tightening, zip tightening, sorry, I'm going to come in by ½ inch, and I'll make a slant from the ½ inch to the edge of the zipper allowance this way. This is just to avoid zip bulge. And I am still going to take in my 1 inch for zipper allowance this way. So I'm just going to trim this excess. So my patterns are ready, and I'm going to cut this out on my fabric. So to cut out the facing, I'm going to place it on another pattern paper this way, and I'll make sure good sides are together. So I'll be using about 2 or 3 inches width for the pattern. So I'm just going to use my tracing wheel to trace out the neckline this way. So after doing that, I'm going to place it this way, good sides together this way, and then I'll sew by 1/4 inch, and then I'll turn it over. So I'll do the same thing on the back piece. So I've cut it out on my fabric. Now I'm going to place the facing, and then I'll pin it down. I'll make sure I align it, and then I'll sew by 1/4 inch. I'll do the same thing on the back piece. On the back piece, I will not finish up the neckline. I'll stop at 1 inch or 1.5 inch, and I'll fix my zip before I finish up the neck. So I've done that. After sewing on the 1/4 inch, I notched it and ironed it. As you can see. And I did the same thing on the back piece. So to join the shoulder, I'll place good sides this way, and I'll join the shoulder. So I'll make sure the facing are together, as you can see. Then I'll turn it this way and I'll sew by 1/2 inch. I'll pin down the side seam and I'll sew a 1 inch for side seam, and I'll take in my darts. So I've done that. I took in the dart and I sewed on the 1 inch for side seam allowance. So I'll be using this 2 yards of satin fabric for the lining, and the length is 40 inches. So I'll be using 2 inches to hem. So I'll use both edge for the zipper allowance. So starting from the 1 inch for zipper allowance, I'll sew on 1/2 inch all through the 2 yards, and I'll gather it up to the waist circumference, which is 31 inches, and I'll hem the lower part. So I've done that. This is the waist circumference, which is 31 inches, and I left 1 inch on both sides for zipper allowance, and I stitched on the gathers to keep it in place. So the next thing I'm going to do is to mark where my zip will stop. So I'm starting from 17 inches because of the upper part of the dress. So I'll mark 21 inches and I'll sew down from the 21 inches to the hemline. So I've done that. So the tulle is 30 yards and the length is 60 inches. So I'll fold it this way and use a low temperature to iron the middle so I can divide it into 2. That is on the whole 30 yards. So I'll divide it for the first and the second layer. So for the first layer, I'll be using 20 yards, and I'll use the longest stitch on my sewing machine to sew on 1/2 inch all through the 20 yards, and I'll gather it up to the waist circumference. So I've done that, and I left 1 inch on both sides for zipper allowance, and I stitched on the gathers to keep it in place. So for the second layer, I gathered 40 yards, and I also stitched on the gathers to keep it in place. So after doing that, I'll join the lining and the first layer together. So on the first layer, I'll sew on the zipper allowance. That's the 1 inch for zipper allowance I left on both sides. So I'll sew and stop at where I want my zip to stop. So I'll align it this way. I'll align the zipper allowance this way, and then I'll sew on 1/2 inch. So I place the good side of the lining on the wrong side of the tulle. So I've done that. I've joined the lining and the first layer, as you can see. So the next thing I'm going to do is to join the upper part of the dress. I'll align the zipper allowance and pin it down this way, and I'll sew by 1/2 inch. So I've done that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the zip. So I've done that, and I ensure it is aligned on the waist, and I finished up the neckline, as you can see, and I cut out the excess zip and I sewed close to the zipper tip. So that is it. So I'm going to serge all through the facing, and I'll use a hand needle or a hemming gum to keep it in place. And I am also going to trim the gathers on the waist, and I'll serge. The next thing I'm going to do is to attach the sleeve. So I have a video on how to draft a basic sleeve, so I'll put the link on the description box below. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the second layer of the tulle. So I'm going to place it this way, that is on 1/2 inch, and then I'll sew all through. So that is it, and we have come to the end of this tutorials, guys. She loves her birthday dress. If this was helpful, kindly give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to click on the subscribe button and also turn on the notification bell to be updated when I upload a new video. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.